Give me a thumbs up when we're thumbs up. Give me a right thumbs up to let me know your left thumbs up. Yo, parish orphans and retrogrades. It is August the 7th, 2024, the year of our Lord, 2024. And today with me is my longtime friend, Matthew Marsden, actor extraordinaire, Catholic extraordinaire, all around good dude. Matt, thanks for joining the show. We were just talking about how this is the first time I think you've ever been on Rules for Retrogrades, and we've been friends for 5 or 6 years.
Yeah, thank you for having me. Yeah, it's crazy because I felt like, I don't know why, maybe it's because, when we talk, we natter on forever, but I kind of felt like I'd already been on, but I haven't. So
that's weird.
Go.
Yeah, that reverse deja vu or something. I think we became friends the first year I was on the internet, which was the 2018, late 2018, and
yeah.
we would talk all the time. That was when we both lived in Southern California, not far away, probably an hour and a half away from each other. We'd get together, we'd talk behind the scenes. You'd give me feedback on shows. That was in the Taylor Marshall TNT days. But all the issues I want to talk to you about, Matthew Marsden, actor extraordinary. People, if you don't know, he's in things like Black Hawk Down and the Rambo reboot, Transformers 2, which is a movie that gets beaten up on, but I like that movie a lot. And we're going to talk about a lot of those things today, that running this rangy span from Roman Catholicism, mass immigration in England, because you're Englandish.
Englandish,
yeah, you're Englandian. Feminism, the Olympics, that's something we're talking about. We usually agree on everything. There will be something interesting to talk about there. Masculinity in general, particular masculinity in the ranks of Christianity. But the first topic I want to talk to you about, Matt, is something that I feel like has spanned the ranks of our friendship, something we always talk about behind the scenes, related it to you as a conservative in Hollywood, no longer in Hollywood. You moved to Texas. I moved to Mississippi around the same time. And then me, I remember when I was kind of in the trad world, and people were like, well, I don't know that this guy is what I was used to. So you immediately sort of commiserated. The big topic is conservatives and even faithful Catholics really kind of eat their own, and the left doesn't do this. I feel like we've talked about this a million times.
Yeah, I mean, it's a source of massive frustration for me. I mean, you're seeing it right now politically, especially politically, where you have, I mean, look, I'm a big fan of Ron DeSantis. I like Ron DeSantis. But he lost. He didn't win the primary. So, people that are going on and they're like, oh, well, Ron DeSantis, he's principled man, and I'm not going to vote for Trump. And I'm like, okay, so what you're really doing right now, I mean, this is just talk about politically, right? Is what you're doing right now is you're giving the vote to the other side, basically. You because of your principled stance, what that means is you're kind of elevating the other side. And I just don't see how that's I don't understand the mentality in that. I understand this kind of like, well, I'm going to stand by my principles, but what happens both politically and in the entertainment industry, and unfortunately, as you know, and we've spoken about this multiple times, Catholics are a nightmare for this. But so in the entertainment industry, the left just coalesces behind one person, or they'll come together and they'll work together. And we don't. We just don't do it. We don't look after each other. We don't. I mean, I say we, of course, we do, because we understand the problem and we've worked actively to try and remedy that, even if it's between a very small group, right? But you see it a lot. You see Like, I mean, I don't think I've ever been hired by a conservative since I came out as a conservative. I've certainly never been hired by any Catholics. And so they talk a good game, right? You know, so Catholic filmmakers will go out and say, listen, we're Catholics and this is what we do. I'm like, okay, well, who did you hire?
Right.
You went to the same Hollywood talent pool, didn't you? Because you were
Right.
seduced by the same thing. So they will go out in film, even though they've got very little, and no one, I'm not saying anyone in particular, but I'm not talking about Mel or, you know, the big guys, but they'll go out and they'll say, well, we're authentically Catholic and that's what we do. And oh, sorry, guy, that's authentically Catholic. I'm not going to have you in my film, but I will partner with other people that basically I complain about behind the scenes. So we really don't have this kind of, you know, the Jews do it very, very well. They support each other. Even the Muslims do it very, very well. And Catholics are the worst. They are the worst. They will slit your throat. You know this in the entertainment industry, especially. And they just do not come together. And it's like, oh, I've got this like little silo of followers, or I've got fans, and I'm going to keep them. I'm going to keep them. I'm not going to
Right.
share. I'm not going to be I'm not going to be an example of the way that you should be, because you know a rising tide lifts all boats, right, Tim? Like we've always been like this. Like you'll call me up and I'll say, "Hey, Tim, blah blah blah." You know, we have that dialogue, and it's freely giving to one another. And like you said, it doesn't mean that you have to always agree with each other on everything, but there's that fundamental principle of our faith that is the cornerstone, is the foundation of our friendship, basically. And
Yeah.
so we should look after each other, but we don't.
My first exposure to good, like coalescence and coalition building, was via Patrick Coffin, who remains a close friend to this day. Shocker, because he observes the principle. And you. And I think it was actually Pat saying, he's hooked me up with so many of the folks that I know, so many of them that people associate. Oh, Tim knows so and so. A lot of that was Patrick, but you were a connection through Patrick. I forget. One tends to forget friend B. Actually, oh, I only know friend B through friend A, but it does well in the space of gratitude to remember. And you and I are friends through Patrick, and it's absolute good networking, better in essence and in spirit than even the way the Jews do it. That's all Hollywood Jews. That's a whole other story. They're really, really efficient at it. But this is the Christian spirit of charity, where Pat's like, you know who, I don't know, makes me laugh a lot, just like you, Tim? Matt Marsden. And so I'm going to hook you guys up. And he just, boom, he does it out of the goodness of his heart. And
Yeah, he's the real deal. He I mean,
yeah,
he's like you said, and sorry to cut you off. I just wanted to say to agree with you, and also say, Pat he's probably the most generous person as far as sharing contacts and not worrying about it. He's a facilitator, and he wants to put good people with good people.
right.
And so I will never have a bad word said about Pat Coffin.
Never.
You can say what you want. You might disagree with him on this and that, but he's a really, really good man. Like, he's genuinely a good man. I love him as a brother. He's he's the real deal. And you're right. He put us together, and I always say the same thing about you. You're a genuinely good man with a good heart. And you look, when you're in that space and you're out there and you hear, I mean, I'm sure you get it about me, you're in nattering. I'm like, listen, I don't want to hear it. Like, these are my friends. I don't want to hear it. These are, you might disagree with them. That's fine. But the principle is, when the poop hits the fan, you're going to look one side and there's going to be Pat Coffin. You're going to look the other side and there's going to be Tim Gordon, and you're good to go. You know what I'm saying? Like,
Right.
that's the important thing. And I think we've lost that a little bit. Again, like you said, you have always been, like, if ever I need any help on anything, like anything, theological that I want to talk to somebody about, I'll text you or call you, and you are immediately there. I don't think I've ever had an instance where you haven't, or even when I've called you and I've said, hey, firstly, you always pick up, unless you're in mass, but you always pick up. And secondly, you always will always give your time. And I think that it's important for people to understand that the person away from the camera is the same.
Yeah.
right? You
Yeah.
get like, it's very rare that you get someone who is the same person in front of the camera as they are away from the camera. And you and Pat are both like that, and I'm very, very grateful for your friendship.
You too, man. And that is, I guess, what we're talking about. We said the left is good at coalition building, the right's not good at it, but this spans into a related subtopic, which is what you see, what you get. And it's not, I mean, I'm sorry to, disabuse folks of their affections or whatever, but with so many of the conservative, because I've been working more in the broader conservative space the last couple
Yeah.
of years than just
Yeah.
the Catholic space. When St. Paul got disillusioned with evangelizing the Jews, he took it to the Gentiles. That's where I've been the last couple of years, but I still do Catholic commentary and news. And it's the same with the famous, it's not real celebrity, it's what Pat calls micro celebrity, because it's on YouTube. But with big YouTubers that are Catholic, I can't say that most of them are the same on and off screen.
Yeah.
I will always, like you said, I mean, I'm just parroting what you said, always say with Pat, like the good man you see, the man you could people know my flaws from watching me 3 times a week. I have a really loyal fan base. People, I'm sure, can see, you have flaws, Pat has flaws, I have flaws. The flaws and the strengths are exactly what you see on the screen, but same thing, like, that's just not a conservative leitmotif any longer. And it should be. I guess it makes a little more sense to me, Matt, that conservatives struggle because we cleave to principles. The left doesn't. It's just power. It's the eye of Sauron, the will to power Nietzschean thing. So they don't get caught up on, well, I'm not going to vote for Trump because I like DeSantis, or vice versa. That's a little bit more understandable, though it's troubling, than the absolute, at least it suggests integrity. Whereas this related problem of a lot of conservatives, a lot of Catholics are just not the same on off screen and on screen. That's an actual integrity issue. And that's always what I was like, man, I have like business friends that do this, that are well known, like, but you and Pat are some of the guys I really, really trust. Pat was there when Abby came back from having half her brain removed 4 years ago. He came out to our RV. We were living in an RV during COVID, and it's like, he's like, I'll be there. So I don't know. Why do you think, I'm always going to incline toward talking about it in the Catholic space, but, and you will, also a Catholic, but you incline more toward talking about it in the conservative space. Why is it such a problem? I mean, like, I know the Catholic conservative filmmakers who made that crap film, Cabrini. And I mean, I know them a little behind the scenes. You know them better. And I'm like, man, the coolest, like, flyest, dopest, best man that they could go get for a lead for their movies, if they wanted to get a conservative, faithful Catholic man, would be Matthew Marsden. And I mean, I'm not trying to be overly specific, but why are conservatives so bad at this? Why are they not going to the well that they should?
Okay, so I mean, I'm not going to address this. This isn't
Not
to anyone specific,
no,
right?
no,
Like, so this
no.
isn't anyone specific.
I didn't mean it that way. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm just clarifying that for what I'm about to say. So I think that, for those people that don't know, like, so I grew up a cradle Catholic. I went away from the faith. I had a reversion later on in my life, and that was after I'd had a lot of success, right? A lot of success in the UK. Came over, did Black Hawk Down, was in Hollywood, doing movies. So I knew what it was like to be famous, right? In the UK, I couldn't walk down the street, right? When I was on Coronation Street in 97, 98, right? It was insane. I didn't, because I think that, just to go back to think about what inspires someone to go into the arts like that. So for me, I'm sure, and we can talk about this later, I'm sure I didn't have a dad in my life, so I felt like there was something missing. So there's some kind of like psychological need there, that I wanted validation, but it just so happened that I was really good at acting. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to try and pursue this. And, I don't know why it happened, but it did. God's will, obviously, but I ended up being a success, but I didn't do it for fame, right? I did it because I wanted to be really good at something, which now things have really changed, right? People do stuff for fame and they're not good at anything, right? So just, put a pin in that, right? So, so I had a lot of success. I knew that fame was BS. I knew it didn't make you happy. I knew that the money doesn't make you happy. The pursuit of it and all that, it's just like you're a hamster on a wheel, right? So when I came back to my faith, I knew that aspect of it. I knew that like the faith was ridiculous. It doesn't really change, because people are always kind of aspiring to the next thing instead of being where they are. And so when people would say, I'd meet Catholics in the industry and they go, oh, I really want to make like Catholic movies. And I got sucked into it, right? Initially, I got sucked into it. I was like, this is great. People are aligned. But they think that they are immune to the temptations, right? So they think they're immune to the premieres and the planes and the nice hotels and the cars and all this. Well, I'd been through all that. So I knew it didn't bring you happiness. And I knew like it doesn't hold anything for me. It's not an attractive thing for me. But when you all of a sudden make all this money, or you're going and you're doing, I don't know, like, you're flying here and you're flying there and you're meeting with this person and there's that person that you saw on TV, like, or movies like 10 years ago. Now you're out for dinner with them and, oh, look. And then what happens is they think that they are immune to it and they're not. And the fact that they think they're immune to it makes them even more susceptible to it because they don't have their guards up when they go into it, right? So it becomes seductive. And then once they're in it, they like it and they look around and they're like, the precious. I'm going to keep this. It's mine. It's mine. No, you can't come in and you can't come in. And especially if you're someone who knows it's all BS and you can call them on it, or you can say, well, hang on a second. Like, what are you doing? You know what I'm saying? You're fearless about that, which is what, like I say, what you see is what you get with you. What you see is what you get with me. Either you appreciate that, you know where you stand, warts and all, or you don't. But like I said, I know when I call Tim Gordon, I know what I'm going to get. You know what you're going to get with me. Well, a lot of people are afraid of that because they don't want to be called on their BS, especially, for example, in your area of expertise, theology, philosophy, they don't want to open the door to that, right? Because to lesser educated people, and this isn't like, not everyone's got a doctorate, right? So it's not some kind of a put down, but to lesser educated people, they can be more manipulated. And I think it's the same in the entertainment industry. Like, you can't tell me the way it goes on film, right? You can try as best as you want, but I've done more than pretty much any of the other Catholics, apart from Jim and Mel, right? And Mark, right? Like the big guys. I've done, more than the majority of them, right? So they can't BS me. So as you're a good steward and you're sitting there and you're seeing people talk to others, and you're like, hang on a second, like, that's not right. That's not true. Why are you compromising your faith right now? You're going around telling everybody that you're these Catholics and you go to TLM and you're so holy and all that, but you're aligning with other people, right? That over here, you're saying that you don't want to align with. At least with me, like, I'll go into it and I'll go, hey, listen, this is the way it's got to be. I'm gonna work with these other people because we don't have the infrastructure to do it properly in just our own little communities, right?
The Catholic thing.
In the Catholic thing. So yeah, so what we're not doing is we're not elevating our own people, right? We're not looking and saying, hey, there's enough to go around here. Let's work together. And so it becomes very siloed. Like there's all these little islands around. And it's weird to me because, like I said, that world doesn't hold anything for me. It's not something I want to be a part of. I'm not seduced by it. I like getting paid, and do I like going to other, nice places? Well, I do, but now that means I'm away from a family, right? So priorities change, right, Tim? And so I think that, part of it is this. Number one, I can call them on their BS because I know that, when they are failing and why they're failing. and they don't want that, and they also don't want you around people that are, you know, have money. Because if you go around people with money and they go, well, hang on a second, he just said what, you know, what you're getting paid how much, whatever it might be.
Yeah.
They don't want that, so they silo it instead of opening the doors and saying, hey, listen, we're a team, let's work together. I'm going to use you in your film. You know, for me, I'm going to hire you as a director. You know, and that's why, to be honest with you, like, we've got probably one of the greatest living directors in Mel Gibson. Why isn't he directing?
Well, I mean, but
Everyone should be giving him money. You know, people should be giving one of the greatest living directors money to go and make great movies, but they're not. And I'm not saying this is on Mel's part. I'm saying it's on everybody else's part, right? Like,
yeah,
why aren't we going to him? And, you know, whenever you speak to anyone about film, they go, well, have you spoken to Mark? You know, have you spoken to Mel? I'm like, they understand this, what I'm talking about. So they don't want to be a part of it.
right.
You know what I'm saying?
Isn't he independently resourceful though? I mean, like, he's making the sequel to The Passion on his own dime, isn't he? Can't he do that with more movies, or does that just add up?
Well, he can, but it's not good business. You
It's not.
know, no,
No.
because I mean, and this is the thing is that Mel Gibson has a dollar value amount, right? Like,
Yeah.
number one, he's an amazing actor, and he's an even better director, right? So we should be funding him.
Right.
I mean, we should, and but this is a little bit of like, again, the Catholic mentality. Well, he's got the money. Why shouldn't he do it? Right.
Yeah.
Well,
That's not what I'm saying, but
no,
yeah,
I know that's not what you're
yeah,
saying.
yeah,
I know it's not what you're saying, but
yeah,
and so he is going off and doing his own thing. But initially, when when he was doing the Passion of the Christ, he couldn't get the money for it,
yeah,
which is insane. He's an Oscar-winning director that's Catholic, and you aren't going to give him money. And this is, I think it kind of, and this is like a little bit of a separate subject, right? Is that we have to look and say, well, why won't Catholics back that? And a lot of the time, again, it goes back to what we were saying before about, you know, the people that turn up and they, and I'm not ragging on TLM people. I just want to, I want to, you know, but it tends to be in that community, right? Is that everyone's dressed very nicely, everyone's on their best behavior, everyone tells you how holy they are, right? In this particular instance, and then
yeah,
they'll go and treat people really badly behind the scenes.
yeah,
But as long as they turn up and they go to mass and they do the right thing and they tell you how bad you are, you know, people kind of give them a pass. But they're going off and they're not treating people well. And I see this over and over again. I mean, it doesn't have to be the TLM. I'm just using that as an example because
a
it's
hilarious example. Kale Zeldin, he made this joke on Twitter the other day. I think it was true. He was like, I was literally just told to fuck off by someone who in their Twitter bio says, like, a life touched by grace. It's like,
but this is it, right? This is
happened.
it. I mean,
Yeah,
I want to meet people. You know, the church is a hospital for broken people, right? Like, we need Jesus. That's the whole point of it. So, you know, like I say, I would much rather, like, we've had this discussion about cursing, right? About swearing.
yeah.
Um,
Shit tons of times. Shit
yeah,
ton.
yeah, a whole shit ton of times, right? And I had this recently. I had a really great guy as a Protestant pastor, and he reached out to me and said, "Matt, I love your vigor, your fight. I love it. But can you, like, knock the cursing on the head?" And I get it, right? I understand what he's saying, and I am endeavoring to be a better person. But I came from a broken home in the UK where my mom was divorced. Actually, my sister Odor, she just got divorced, and I've been married for 19 years. I have a ton of kids. I stood up against the, you know what, I'm not going to say because I don't know if it gets you cancelled on here or not, but the jab,
Yeah,
um, stood up against Hollywood, lost my ability to earn money,
I
and you're going
remember.
to come to me about dropping the F bomb? Like,
I
I
know.
know in your little, like, warm little world, right, that you can really focus on that. But to me, I mean, please don't tell me you stub your toe and you say, "Oh, fiddlesticks." You know, I mean, to me, I guess, Tim, what I'm saying is that, like, there's a lack of authenticity out there because people feel like they have to put this face on.
Yeah.
instead of organically being who you are. And I think if more people, it doesn't mean you shouldn't correct people in their error, right? Like, I'm not saying that, but I think that if we meet more people where we are, then we're going to attract more people to the faith,
Of
right?
course.
Rather than telling them that, these are the barriers to entry, right?
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
mean, and let people work on it and work in the community. So anyway, yeah,
There's so much to say there. For one thing, American Protestants in the 1840s or 1850, maybe 1860s, and made this neologism cursing, which is a mortal sin, using the Lord's name in vain, particularly GD, which I
yeah.
never say. I
I
don't
never
ever
say
say
it.
it. If I drop a
Never.
bag of hammers on my foot, I'll say shit. Saying shit, that's poop. That's not cursing. It's in the Bible, folks. The Greek word is skubala. It's been known since time immemorial as the Greek word for shit, the worst word for human poop, or like I guess at least an animal's poo, is skubala, and St. Paul uses it in the Bible. So don't tell me I'm swearing if I deliberately avoid swearing, saying the Lord's name in vain, which is not a habit I have. I just never do it. I can honestly say that. But if I say, oh, fuck, or oh, shit, that's not swearing. So
Yep.
please, I'm just so sick of that conversation. And you and I have gotten into it, I think, in Twitter groups,
Yep.
in DM groups. It's just such a boring and lame conversation. And I think they'll say it's not manly to swear. I'm like, well, it's not manly to fall into basic traps of the neologism where you're using a word
Yeah.
wrong. That's not manly. And yeah, it kind of is. I mean, I don't really trust someone if they say I never say this or that. It's also
Exactly. That's my point, right? Again, it's a lie. So you're going to lie about not saying that you don't do something. Like say, you're telling me you stub your toe and you go, oh, flipping, flippy, flip, flip. It's just not reality. I mean, maybe, I think the Saints probably didn't do that. But I mean, look, St. Paul said that and by the way, they will absolutely argue to the death that that is not what it means.
yeah, I know.
Right. Absolutely.
Sorry.
They just can't. And you're like, look, he said it. It is what it is. Now, maybe instead of you, and we have this battle all the time, instead of you like trying to make it so that that doesn't fit your narrative or, your view of the way the Bible is, right? Or about the way your faith is, you should probably just actually accept it for what it is and move a little bit and learn from it. But they tend to be very rigid on that. And like I said, I don't know if it's like this is a really interesting thing. So when I did Rambo, I think on one of the times I said to Sly, because he wrote it, because if you're like not religious, right, and you're writing GD or JC, they have in nearly every television show and film, right? It's just part and parcel. And
Right.
I didn't want to say it, but it's also not something that Brits say. So that's
Really?
a really interesting. Oh yeah, you can say OMG, right? But you don't say JC or GD. It's just
Huh.
not in a British language. So I could say to him, "Listen, I'll never forget it. I went, Sly. I, I just want to say, because he wrote it, right? I was like, but I didn't, and he was awesome, by the way. I said, we never Brits don't say this, and he goes, it's just a suggestion. And I went, but yeah, because he's a writer, right? I don't want to be like, disrespectful. And so I said, but I just want you to know, like, belaboring the point, like, because it's
Huh.
Stallone. I was like, but, it's just, Brits don't say GD. And he was like, it's just a suggestion. And I was like, okay, all right, like, I'm stepping off now.
So he's cool with you not saying it.
Well, yeah, because it was
Wow.
it's actually a character thing as well. I mean, in those instances, and I've done it multiple times. It's funny that they won't let you show a cross on television or on screen. I'm not saying he wouldn't, he would. I mean, in my character in Rambo, I actually had an angel on his shirt, right? And he had Christian missionaries and all that. But on other things, they'll tell you take your take your cross off, but they will write in GD, JC all the time, right? So there's, I mean, it's a clear
But that wouldn't be
bias.
Sly. I mean, you tell me. You're the one that knows the man. But I thought Sly. I'm judging by Rocky 2 alone,
Yeah,
where he's kind of substituting for the Latin. He gets married to Adrian in one of the openings, second scene, in Italian, which is cool. It's a beautiful big cathedral church in Philadelphia in the Iladel. And it's my ideal wedding. Like no one's there aside from a couple of witnesses, the priest, and he carries Adrian home. It's really beautiful, and he has the cross through the whole thing. Did he lose his Roman Catholicism?
No,
No.
no. I'm saying that Sly is different because in it you have the pastors that are there. They talk about God. He references it all the time. Like I say, I mean, like my character has an angel on him. I'm not talking about him. I'm talking about others. And he has, he has
Old
the
Testament
weight.
people. Yeah.
I'm just saying, in Hollywood, he had enough weight, and I think at that time. So when we did Rambo, so he because I was meant to take over the franchise from him on that film. I think I told you before, but so he'd had like a kind of a few years in the wilderness, because everyone falls out of favor at some point, and then he just came back with Rocky, and so he was having his resurgence. But I think that even if you one of the great speeches from Rocky Balboa, which I think is an absolute masterpiece of a movie, actually, people don't talk about it, where he says, I held you in the palm of my hand. I was like, this is just unbelievable. And I asked him about it, just segueing a bit, Tim. I asked him about it, and he said he actually wrote some of those lines, because I said that is one of the most beautiful things I've ever heard, because you know what it's like when you get your baby and you hold them in the palm of your hand. I mean, and he said, I was debating whether or not I should put it in. I wrote it one night and I was like, I'm really glad you did. I'm really glad you put it in, because it was great. But I think that he had, he was the biggest star in the world for years and years and years. And then, like anything, you have a dip, right? You might make a couple of errors. Certainly, those talking about masculinity, those masculine men became out of favor. So he was kind of discarded for a bit. And then he came back. And I think that you see a lot of that humility in his writing, because he's an exceptional writer. So if you look at the things, if you look at like Rocky Balboa, there's a lot of humility there. He's like kind of a washed up champ, and he runs a restaurant, and he wants relevance. He feels like he's got something. What does he say? There's something here, and then he takes it over into Rambo as well, like saying, look, and I think this really actually kind of goes into what you say a lot, talking about masculinity, is like, hey, listen, Christians aren't meant to be wussies. Like, you got to remember what this is all about, right? You are a warrior for Christ. And a lot of people say, oh, well, we don't want to talk about that. And, really, it's metaphorically, it's like, get your rosaries. Yeah, it is. It is. But it's also, if you look back at, Lepanto, if you look back at the Great Siege in Malta, if you look at, it's actually about literally going out and fighting people. And people don't want to acknowledge that. I don't know why. But it is. It's that warrior mentality. And I think that that's what he gets across in Rambo, if you think about it. For those of you who haven't seen, the missionaries that go up the river, and then we have to go in and save them, and they realize in the end that actually they're confronting evil and they've got to fight. And I think that's really important. So anyway, sorry, I went on a tangent, but I don't think it's about Sly. I wasn't referencing Sly on that. I'm talking about like the industry, and they will tell you to take your crosses off and cover it up and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, because he's either a lapsed Catholic or a practicing Catholic. I'm not sure. I don't know if I'm kind of curious.
I think he around that period of time, because if you think about, look, even the first Rocky, it starts off on a picture of Jesus.
I know.
The opening scene is a picture of Jesus.
Yeah.
And then it pans down and he's having that fight, right?
Yeah.
And he wrote that.
Yeah, that was beautiful. Not just Jesus, Mr. Marsden, but Jesus with the Holy Eucharist.
Yeah.
It's beautiful. I mean, like, dude, that's one of my favorite opening scenes ever. And I don't know. Well, you've directed films. I'm currently currently producing 2 films with my director friend, Nicholas Stumphauser, who I've introduced you to. I don't know if this counts as part of that scene, but Rocky's walk home, where it just gets quiet after he's this ham and egger. It's a late night. He's beat up. He's been headbutted in the head by Spider Rico, sleazebag ham and egger. He's got a heart of gold, and his walk home with the young girl who he tries to advise, and you get a sense for the whole franchise, eventual franchise, in that one walk home. And he's talking, who am I to give advice?
Yeah.
And then he walks by the crooners, the whatever it is, the quartet or quintet of crooners, and it's his brother Frank Stallone's "Take Me Back," one amazing song actually written by Frank. And in the tension in the pit of your gut from Jesus in the Eucharist, very opening shot, through Rocky's walk home. I'm calling it all one scene, whether it is or not. You know what this film's going to be about. This guy's got a heart of gold, but he's not living his best life, and he's going to follow the shining path. And that is why I love that he pictures a church in Rocky too. So all of that goes to say it's one of my favorite opening scenes of all time. And I hope he's a practicing Catholic. And I wasn't suggesting, if Sly's out there listening, I wasn't suggesting that he's the one that uses JC and GD as curse words. I've heard from Atlee and Childs that it's the people who really run Old Testament wink that they actually use Jesus's name as a curse word. That makes a lot more sense. But anyway.
I mean, I would just say this. I think that culture matters, right? So in the same way you look at, I grew up looking at Rocky and I was like, hey, listen, I can achieve anything. Right. If I can get to America, if I work hard, I can achieve anything. But there's something authentically Catholic about that character, right?
Yeah.
He's authentically Catholic. And just in praying, and like to this day, I know, we talk about, boxing, going out and hitting the bag. Like if I put Eye of the Tiger on, it's still like, to me, it's the greatest workout song of all time. And you're immediately transported back, right? But I think that it's not necessarily, those words are used just because they're in the cultural lexicon. I think that people are used to writing them like that because it's a cool way of writing for the most part, that's what they think. Oh, blah, blah, blah. It's the same thing. I actually had a discussion with a young girl yesterday or the day before yesterday, she's an aspiring filmmaker. And she was just saying, oh, I'm an actor and I've got to do this sex scene. I said, and by the way, this is someone who's done them in the past, right? I was like, it rarely elevates the material. So you need to go back and ask the director why you're doing it. Like, is it really necessary? And I think that what has happened over, the space of the last 30 years is these things have just become like, okay, that's what happens. That's what you have in the movie, right? Rather than thinking about finding a better way to tell the story, it's just kind of like, a trope kind of thing. Like, it's just put in. And as I've got older, I look at it more like that. I'm like, okay, well, are you just a lazy screenwriter, right? Is there any reason for this? A lot of the times it's, with nudity and whatever, I know we're segueing a little bit, anything with nudity, it's just about putting literally bums on seats, like it's, sex sells. But I think that it's now become so regular in society that they feel like they have to put it in. And I think it's the same thing with JC and GD. I think that, it's like a curse word that they don't really feel like is a curse word, because if if it's an MPAA thing and they're getting a rating, they don't look at GDs or JCs, which they should, right? In a Christian nation, like that should be looked at exactly the same, if not more than the F-bomb. You know what I'm saying? So it's kind of a weird thing.
Well, I don't want to get off on a whole thing, but Al Goldstein, the founder of Screw Magazine, I think he said the silent part out loud when he said the reason that we capital W put sex scenes in movies, bracket, it's the same reason that JC is a curse word. is because we hate Catholicism and because it will penetrate to the heart of American culture, the kind of pornographication. So has there ever been, you could go yes or no on this. You don't even have to justify one way or there. Has there ever been a sex scene that makes the movie better? It's always just awkward. And you're like,
No,
okay.
it's,
Ever?
listen, no. And I think it's, when you're in an industry where like it's kind of expected for you to do it, for you to stand up and say no, it takes enormous amounts of courage. And I know that might sound silly, but if you don't have any religious convictions, like why wouldn't you just carry on and do it? And I don't think there's enough support for people. There certainly was, it's like for women, you're kind of like, well, they might, the people are a little bit more sensitive, but when it comes to guys, not at all. It's a very strange thing, and it's the whole time. These things are super super awkward and not nice, and not, people think that they're like, wow, you go and you do kiss this woman, and I'm like, it's not like that at all. Like, it's just not pleasant. And for me, it just got worse and worse, as I evolved, because you got to remember, like, you're in this mentality, and someone who is not wasn't really solid on their faith, that you're in this mentality that you are committed to your craft, right? And you're told that this is what you do. This is why these, like, what was it called now? Monsters Ball and whatever. People see that and they're like, okay, that's going to get me the Oscar, right? Like, that's what they're looking at. So I don't think there's some. I mean, for me, it's more of a Marxist thing to tear down the moral center. And we know about Bella Dodd and all that, but I think it's a Marxist ploy to tear down the moral fabric of the United States. And then I just think the people have just copied it. And I think we've seen that on multiple different levels, on multiple different things, right? Like, it's got, again, sorry for another segue, but it's like, calling people racist just because you disagree with them, right? Now, people just do it. People just say you're a fascist, and they don't even know what that means, right? They just say it because what it basically means, we know this is like, I don't want you to have a voice. And so it might be started by people that know what they're doing, but then it's mimicked by the useful idiots afterwards to stop any kind of meaningful dialogue. But now what we've got is we've got to a point where nobody cares. So those things don't matter anymore. In fact, if someone calls you a racist these days, you're like, great, so you don't like me. So, all right, that's okay. I don't care. Those things have gone, and it used to be that was the worst thing ever that you could be called, and now nobody really cares.
Well, to
Right.
boomer, but see, now we've restored the order of nature. To be a racist, it's not that big of a deal. I mean, to have a sort of preferential kinship group, second nature.
Everybody has it, Tim.
It.
It's natural. I think there's a difference between like persecuting someone. Like I was, sorry to cut you off, but like there was this idiot woman in England that was like, I am mother to 2 half Muslim North African children. I'm like, you can't be half Muslim. It's like me being half Catholic. And by the way, it's not a race.
Right, exactly.
Right. Islam, being a Muslim, is not a race any more than being a Catholic is, right?
And the boomers are that's the liberal white woman credo, 2 half Muslims. And the boomers are basically just liberal white women, even the men. Sorry, guys, most of them. And they are the ones that gave us that leitmotif that to be racist is like the only sin that matters. And I'm like, it's not even a sin. Guys, if racism were sin, then the Good Samaritan would be basically devoid of all of its virtue. Jesus is like, if you go and you help someone of a different ethnicity, that's doing the Christian thing. That's good. That's like a plus. But Jesus understood that people have natural, kinship group preferences. And by the way, I mean, the boomers are the ones inside the church, outside the church, that gave us the view that basically religion's fake, or if you want to have religion, that's fine. Religious indifferentism. None of the other stuff matters. Contraception doesn't matter. Abortion. But racism matters. I think it's good that they called so many people racist, that everyone learned in the generation millennial and generation Z. They just learned to be like, oh, it doesn't even matter. So like instead of being like, no, I'm not, it's just like maybe I am. Who
Who
cares?
cares? Who
Yeah,
cares?
that's
I mean, it has been, it's been kind of amazing, right, to see that. And I think this is what you're seeing in the UK as well, where you know, segue into what we should be talking about, right? But is that people are like, well, hang on a second, I'm sick to death of you telling me that my culture and my history is sinful, like, and only my culture is sinful. We are the only ones to have to carry these, but the whole thing is absurd. And I think that it's got to the point now where, and a lot of people are missing the point on this, that people are just like, I'm done. I don't care if you call me racist. I'm going to go out and I'm going to march, and you can go. And they keep doing it, by the way. They keep doing it, but they only do it to one group of people.
right.
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 They keep doing it to one group of people.
Of course.
And again, it's not going to end well.
Well, no, because it's reminded white people that white people really do like white people. If brown people can love brown people, and black people can love black people, and yellow people can love yellow people, white people haven't, you know, for the boomers and all of their progeny, the intellectual and biological progeny over the last couple, 3 generations, they were actually convinced, or maybe they did the convincing, that white people can't be like, I love whites, I love whiteness. And it just, all of the oppression against whites reminded whites like, oh, I really do love white culture. Like it built the West. It is Christianity, and like hoorah. And I think that's really good. I think it's I think there's a lot of stuff people get blackpilled now. I think there's so much to white pill about. But for the one thing that I've been waiting for, Matt, I want to give you a chance to answer this, and I want to take a pause for a second. But first, you answer this. The white pill that I've been heralding as a Catholic, and it has much to do with my particular platform and stuff, is when will Christians return to true masculinity? This goes back to what you were saying with Rocky. Why is it that manly guys that like boxing and generally speaking guns and have been in some probably street fights in their day and all of that for several generations just thought, well, I guess Christianity is not for me, even though it's the manliest religion. It says embrace your cross. And Christians were pretty much like, yeah, that's right. Like if you're a man here, you're going to be henpecked by your wife. You're going to be skinny and weird and won't fill out a suit, or fat. You'll either be too skinny or too fat, and you'll have a scraggly weird beard, and you'll can cluck your tongue at manly men who do the heavy lifting if they say shit or something. And like, why has that been slow to return? Because Christianity is the ultimate religion of manly men, and it's coming back a little bit with the Zoomers, but it's loath to come back. We've talked about this a lot. What do you say?
Well, I think a lot of it is obviously leadership of the church, right? Just super lame leaders. Again, not masculine. Like when you find a masculine priest, you're like, oh goodness. So when we're out in Pasadena at the Saint Therese out there, amazing masculine Carmelite priests, like they were just great. And I think they had 150 young altar serving boys who would race to get to serve at the altar, right? Because they were feeling like it's the original thing, right? Like they don't want to go there with girls. It's like the Boy Scouts. The Boy Scouts want to be Boy Scouts. They want to go and do what they do. And bit by bit, that has been taken away from them. Like it's this like notion that of equality, right? Which is ridiculous. I mean, and by the way, for anyone who's talking about equality, go and see what's going to happen with these riots in England and how many female riot police there are. Because this is just real life, guys, right? It just is. I mean, even right now, I'm a 50-year-old man, a 51-year-old man. You could still put me in a riot shield and put me up there, and I'd do better than the majority of very physically active 20-year-old women, right? I mean, it's just the way it is.
And also, like 100%. I want to correct the record. You would do better, and I would do better than 100%. You're also like 6'4", and
I mean, I'm a big guy, but I think that the leadership of the church has done this, and it's made everyone think that you have to be. It's this like kumbaya, like Vatican, I'd say Vatican II kind of like vibe about everyone loves everybody. I was very, very like English, Protestant kind of view. I don't want to say like in America, because I think there's a lot of like strong Christians over here as well, and a lot of times like they do they've done a better job than we have. I mean, certainly in entertainment, they want to get out and fight and get stuff out there. But I think in the UK, Eddie had said, the Church of England became like a hobby church where the pastor has no bones in his arms, and he's like, "Hello, how are you?" There's no strength to it, right? So that has moved. I mean, think about this. Like, think about C.S. Lewis. Think about Tolkien. Like, think about Belloc. Like, all these guys. It wasn't that long ago. It wasn't that long ago that you had dudes that were like super strong. That there was, as I said before, stuff like this, the wartime prayer book. Like these guys went in, they fought wars, and in the back, the overarching thing was they did it for God, right? They were doing it for their faith. They were representing their faith because they believed that the Western world and the Western world that they were engaged in was better. It was a better idea than communism or fascism or the Nazis, right? So, and they fought against that. And I think that what we've done is, firstly, certainly in the UK, I mean, it's not as bad here, but we've kind of stripped that away. The scientism has kind of stripped away that link, and you're kind of ridiculed if you have any kind of faith, right? And so, and the other thing about it is, and you mentioned it, and I hate to say this, and this is probably going to be not really controversial for the people that you reach out to, but it's this like emboldening of white liberal women. And what has happened is like real men don't want someone that's gone through 50 partners, right? But the liberal guys will be like, okay, well, I'm gonna yes, you are so strong. You're so strong. Can I get you in bed? Right. Like, oh yeah, I agree with you. Well, can I get you in bed? Right. And they don't see that that's the game, right? Like, so the men became weaker because they're not going to stand up and go, I'm not going to deal with that. Like, that's ridiculous. I'm not having that. And so I think that there's been this kind of weakening of men. And then so you have a lack of role models. And I think like, so for me, Tim, not having a dad around, I did have and I do want to make a point about this in a minute, but not having a dad around, I did come from a very working class, like rough background. So I think that probably saved me, not having a dad around the place. I mean, I think a lot of the times, you can either fall into having no real role models and become lame, or you can fall into have no real role models and become very aggressive and, destructive.
Yeah.
And let me just say this. I do want to make this point. My grandfather was an Irish Catholic. Came from Dundalk, just across the border in Southern Ireland, or Ireland. And so when he came over to the UK, the IRA was at war with Great Britain, right? It was or with England. It was at war. There was a war going on, and I used to get here abuse all the time. All the time. Irish Catholics, no surrender to the IRA, Sinn Féin, all that. There was a real tension there. And I think that because I was born in England, but I had a Irish Catholic grandfather and I was raised as a Catholic, I kind of saw things a little bit differently in the UK, right? So I've seen racism. I just want to go back to this. So I've seen a lot of racism, but that prejudice towards the Catholics and the Irish was not to do with the color of your skin, right? It was to do with an ideology or, a religion. So this isn't new, right? It's not a new thing. And I think that my perspective on race, and, I've never really, I've certainly never participated in racism. I just haven't. I've seen it as, well, I was in this kind of weird place where I was born in England, so I'm English, but the person that was really raising me was my grandfather, who was Irish, and he was Irish Catholic. And so in a Protestant white country, like, you're kind of like different. You know what I mean? It's like it's a weird dynamic, and things aren't exactly as defined as people want to make it. And you're seeing it right now with which something I can tell you that we never thought would happen is the Unionists and the Irish Republicans are walking together in the streets of Belfast.
I saw that.
That's unbelievable. I mean, that is, I mean, even when the Troubles ended, to think that that would happen it's inconceivable. So I think that it certainly gave me a particular perspective on prejudice and how you get over that, right? Which is, unity. You all come together with a common goal, and it used to be Christ, right? A common focus used to be Christ. Whether it be, the Commonwealth, you look at America, God, Australians, put their, Christ, Canadian. Now that's all crumbled away, right? And whether by design or whatever. And now you're seeing all this disunity and dysfunction, and along with what you were saying about non-masculine men, you have people like Trudeau as the leader of a country. Even in the UK, like, you look at Rishi Sunak, and I mean, it's Sunak or whatever his name is. I mean, he's just like a weak guy. Even now, Starmer weak. It used to be that you'd have men that went to war that were running the country. Winston Churchill, for example, fought in the First World War. So you have all these examples of masculinity gone, and then you have the toxic, this thing, it's toxic masculinity, which is ridiculous. It's a ridiculous statement. So I think that there's a lack of role models. But now I think that what you're seeing is people that are standing up, especially through COVID. And what happened to me when you stood up, people are responding to it. They're going, oh, hang on a minute. Yeah. You have to, we're in a time where we're giving people permission. We're giving the younger people permission to be men, right? And the women permission to be feminine, because for years they've been told that, being, having it's like, it's going to sound corny, but having a short haircut and playing rugby is a good thing, right? And now we're just like saying, hang on a minute, like, you can be a masculine man, you take care of your family, you teach your kids how to fight, right? Because they should know how to fight. You should be able to do, you know what I'm saying, Tim? That's where I think we are.
Of course. What's a life for a man or a young man where you haven't even been in a fight? You've never stood up for anything. Because, I mean, if you stand up for things, you get into fights. Yeah, verbal altercations, but physical altercations, it happens. It's part of life. Catholics out there might be tearing their garments that from time to time will say, yeah, I've been in 8, 9 street fights in my life. And they're like, oh, you're glorifying. It's just part of the deal. I'm not saying it was fun. I'm also not saying I'm like a professional MMA fighter. I've had this thing broke a few times, but it's just what happens when you speak through your chest and you plant your feet and you're like, well, I'm not going to back down. I'm not saying everything is the most celebrated cause that I've ever been in a fight over, but it is training for manhood. And unfortunately, and that's what sports are. And I want to talk to you about this in a minute, but first I want to give you a second to call out some things. I want to call some things out. What's going on at the Olympics is really interesting in this domain. And then I want to close with asking you about actually England. But first, I would just say this. People want to know how they support this show and its guests. You support this show through Locals or Subscribestar. You also can like and subscribe this video, this channel right now. Click the notification bell. But Locals and Subscribestar, because I not only lost my job, but I got kicked off of Patreon a year or two after that for teaching Catholic sexual ethics. Patreon didn't like that. So people supported me by instead jumping off of Patreon and going to Locals or Subscribestar with roughly the same functionality. If you want to, because people ask me all the time about young Abigail, who's now 16, has a brain surgery once every few years. If they just want to donate, that's a different thing. You can go to timothyjgordon.com and click donate, or send it to the P.O. box there. But we also just like and subscribe to the video. Matt, haven't you recently started a YouTube channel of your own? Or where can people find you at?
Yeah, I did. As you know, people have been kind of pestering me to do it for a long time, and I reluctantly kind of stepped into the space. And I've been really bad at keeping it up. Well, I got 8 kids at home. It's like it's hard and doing other things, but covering stuff like the Shroud of Turin and just these kind of things. So Matthew D. Marsden on YouTube, I'm endeavoring to be more consistent with it. Uh, and like I said, I mean, I think a lot of the time, a lot of the stuff that we want to say means I'm actually going to get kicked off YouTube. So, I'm just waiting for that. But I do want to say this, Tim, like I wish I wish people could see the way that you and your wife are with your family away from this, because it is just one of the most amazing things I've ever seen, and again, not to embarrass, not that it's going to embarrass you, but when you told me your story and about your daughter, and I was there with her, and she was around my kids as well. I mean, it's just an absolute testament to God's glory and your faith. And I think that more people need to meet other people where they are. I think there's a very kind of puritanical attitude towards faith. And some things are wrong, right? They just are. And some things might not be wrong. And I think that being open to people and the way that they are, right? The way that they are is really, really important, because, you can learn things from people. Sometimes it's learning what not to do, right? Just don't behave like that. The reason why I say that is I think you and Pat and you guys are such a force for good. And I think a lot of the times people get stuck in the weeds on things instead of seeing the bigger picture. And clearly the people that watch your channel understand that, and they're in, which is really awesome. And I've had it with people with me as well, Tim, because what would you say initially is like, I'm not going to follow anyone who's been in Hollywood. And I'm like, hang on a minute, like, we're not all the same. But I think it's really, really important. And you're talking about not backing down. That's the marketplace of ideas, right? Like you get into the marketplace of ideas, you should be able to defend yourself in those situations, like verbally. And inevitably, I mean, not every single time, but when you win that argument, which if you're Catholic, you should always win the argument, right? Because of what your argument is based upon. Don't be surprised if it's the other person that reacts inappropriately.
Badly. Yeah.
You know what
Yeah.
I'm saying? So I'm just saying, you just got to be ready for it. And especially in this day and age, I mean, you saw it. Do you remember the Nick Sandman thing where they got in his face and all that? It's not us. It's
Right.
not us.
It's them.
So yeah, I mean it's like there are other people that talk about masculinity, and like I agree with 50% of what they say, and then the other 50% is garbage and shouldn't be listened to. And there is an element of, like Belloc says, that all good heresies have an element of truth in them. But I do believe that if you discern correctly, you can separate the good stuff out,
Well,
right? And
it's like the red pill. The red pill is like 50% bang on. It's identifying the maladies of feminism. But then the 50% that's wrong is identifying the remedies to those maladies. And they're just totally wrong. Like I think I wrote something uncharitable to Myron Gaines, Fresh and Fit, just yesterday that I probably shouldn't have said. I should probably take it down. But he was just like, don't get married till you're 35 and you've had a body count of 50 ladies and you have to be worth this much. I'm like, this is so gay, man. Like this. So yeah, but that's
no, please don't take it down. Whatever you said against it, because that's just utter BS. Right?
Yeah.
I mean, it is. And I think that people are like, well, you need to be a little bit more. No, actually, you don't. You don't.
Yeah.
Sometimes, yeah, we're not. It's kind of like someone's coming at us with a gun, and we're gonna like come back at them with like a remote control or something like that. Like, no, you got to come back with it. But otherwise, they keep pushing you back, and if you punch back metaphorically hard on the first go, they'll think twice about coming after you again. And I'm just saying on these things that are like not where there's like squishiness, or if you have an opportunity to evangelize, like, you know, certainly with Protestants and evangelicals, I've found this moving to the South is that they really don't understand Catholicism. Like the majority of the arguments they have are just very, very feeble and easily dismissed. So in that case, I want to like engage with them. Right.
Yeah.
And I did this even with idiots on X. Like, I'll engage with them a little bit just to show how ridiculous they are to everybody else. Right. So there's and then there's other times where you go, do you know what? If you're going to say things about the Blessed Mother, I'm going to smack you in your face.
Right.
I'm sorry.
Which is one good thing Francis ever said. He said, if someone talks about your mother, you punch him in the nose. I'm like, holy cow.
Even a broken clock is right twice a day.
Yeah, once or yeah. The broken clock. I'm still waiting for that second time from Francis, but it seems that with intersexuality, Matt, what a man's supposed to be, what a woman's supposed to be, that confused everyone. Because I said this, I had Pat on the show on Monday. This is like the Pat Coffin show with Matt Marsden today. I said in 2018. When like the TNT stuff with Taylor Marshall went like super giga viral in the Catholic world, and Taylor was like, "Oh, we're like the Catholic bad boys now." That wasn't true. I was getting invited to do talks at parishes. I could take my pick and do parish talks every weekend of the year, and with different bishops, and and slightly right leaning bishops. Everyone loved it when we were, I guess, talking a little trash on the Sunk Island Mafia, and to some extent on the new Pope, medium length Pope. At that point, he'd been for 5 years. That wasn't bad boys at all. It was when I published this bad boy, Case for Patriarchy, and Steph, and more than that, when Steph published the companion piece, Ask Your Husband, on the restoration of true patriarchy, that even trads got mad at us. They're like, you guys are going too far. So that's when those invitations stopped. It wasn't when I was talking about the Pope. And so that all happened around a little bit after I moved here. I moved here late summer of 2020. I'd been fired. I moved here to Mississippi. You moved in slightly later, 2020, to Texas, right? What month did you move to Texas, Matthew?
March.
Oh, you moved before me then. Okay, so I moved in July. You moved in March of 2020 or 20?
No, we had a debate on this last night. I think I moved 2021 because I got my citizenship in 2020. I moved 2021.
Yeah, okay.
So okay. Yeah, 2021. Yeah.
So you're debating with
I'm debating with, and she won.
Oh, yeah, okay. So yeah, because I thought you moved after me. I was trying to get you to move to Mississippi so we could
that's right. Yeah.
Could have some Catholic friends.
The world.
Yeah, and we'd take over then. You moved to Dallas, which was my old stomping ground. Okay, so the intersexuality is the thing. We've mentioned the red pill. We've mentioned what a funky state Catholic or even just Christian masculinism's in. What I didn't want you to take wrong was when I responded to you on Twitter last week when I was in Florida on vacation with the two female boxers.
Oh,
and
yeah.
Thing is like women. You could call gender dysphoria that phenomenon when a woman claims to be a man or a man claims to be a woman, and everyone has to like cop to it and say, yes, ma'am, you are a woman, and the dude's name is Bruce or whatever. I mean, that doesn't affect anyone. Everyone already knows that's wrong. Even like the Olympics committee is basically on the obvious side of biology there. That affects no one. And I made this point to friends at the Daily Wire, to friends at the Blaze, to Tucker Carlson, and they've all been like amenable to it. Like the real gender dysphoria, this is second page of page 4 of Case for Patriarchy. The original gender dysphoria, the one that affects 99% of people, is women that act like men and men that act like women, not claiming to be men, but like functional gender dysphoria. And this little document from the Seneca Falls Convention of Feminists in 1848. It really took hold in the 1970s. And now women they're acting like men all the time. So I look and I see a couple women boxing each other. I say, and one of them is XY chromosome a la Jamie Lee Curtis, but she's been I don't think she's technically gender dysphoric in the biological sense. I look at that Italian and that whatever she is, South American, boxing each other, and I say, you're right, that is gender dysphoria. Any women boxing, I take it further. Any women doing these male sports, anything besides like field hockey, that's gender dysphoria. And you seem to be supporting it, and that's fine. I mean, like no two
No, I
humans.
don't actually. I don't. I actually hate women's boxing.
Okay, good. Yeah. Okay, great.
I
Yeah.
always have. I just don't like it. And look, I know some female MMA fighters. I just don't like it. I don't think it's feminine. And I know that that's probably the wrong thing to say, but my comment on that was just that it in that particular instance, that was someone with XY chromosomes fighting someone with XX chromosomes, and that's like clearly not right. I mean, if you're going to do that, then you may as well just say, okay, well, just have one category. Don't even have weight categories, don't have sex categories, and open the floor to performance enhancing drugs. Just like get it over with, because if
Right.
you have, as if you have, males have slimmer hips, they have stronger bones, they have all these other things that give them an advantage. And even that woman that got hit, she was like, I never got hit like that before.
Right.
And there's of course, listen, and I know people think that's sexist. I don't give a shit anymore. I don't like that. I will teach my daughters to fight, to be able to defend themselves, but I'm not going to put them in a boxing match. It's not going to happen. I don't like it. I think it looks horrible. Yeah, no, I didn't disagree with you. I was just like super, super busy. And I didn't,
Right.
I think I saw it, and then I was just like, because sometimes you want to either, what I've found is a lot of people that just answer on Twitter don't take the time to call their friends and talk to them about it before they respond. So, I know you put that in there, but I was like, oh, maybe I'll call Tim and tell him, like, that's not my stance on it. I don't agree with it. So we're actually aligned on that. So yeah, I don't agree with.
I was trying to, no, sorry, I wasn't trying to put words in your mouth. I was trying to place this article with a mutual, he's not a close friend of mine, mainly a friend of yours, but trying to place this article. So I have a little bit of a preview at it, but I want to read from this article that by Scott Boylan. I've never been hit so hard in my life, said Italy's Angela Carini after forfeiting her Olympic fight. Hopefully this will be up in a couple of days. Only 46 seconds after it began. In the wake of transgenderism entering the world stage, there's been an outcry for the protection of women's sports against the onslaught of transitioned men. The Paris Olympics have brought this important issue to the forefront like never before, and the political right and left have seemingly chosen their sides. Of course, the left is ideologically committed to transgenderism and all of its fruits, while the right attempts to push back by arguing that men should not be taking women's rightful place in sport. What most conservatives don't see is that they're committing the same error that they have been for the past 150 years. Instead of committing to any real principles, they merely assume the progressive position of generations past. Prior to 12 years ago, female boxing was banned from the Olympics altogether. While boxing is clearly the sport most opposed to femininity, we must take a step back and ask ourselves, what is a woman's place in sport? What ought we to be conserving? To answer this question, we must first understand the nature of what it is to be a woman. Clearly, transgenderism is the most perverse answer to this question, and I do not think this audience needs to be convinced that a woman is, in fact, not a man. Most, this is kind of what we said to our friends at Daily Wire, me and Nick, who have a movie in the offing. Most people do not understand what they're admitting when they accept this obvious truth. The principle behind every rebuttal of transgenderism is that simply mimicking female activities, mannerisms, and appearance does not make you a female, and vice versa. To argue this is to necessarily imply that there are activities, mannerisms, and appearances that are inherently female, ordained as such by nature. Otherwise, we have no grounds on which to tell transgenders that they should not continue in their delusion. We have no grounds on which to tell our sons that they can't wear dresses, wear makeup, or do ballet. These are just behaviors. They're just functions. All of this rests on the supposition that there are certain things which are specifically suited for boys and girls, respectively. And the basic claim is that high-level sport of this excellent article that I think you guys are going to be able to see up in a couple of days. High level sport, meaning you're doing it more than 20 hours a week. I don't mean my girls can't come out and shoot baskets with me and Gaby when we're out there shooting baskets. That's fine. But 20 hours a week or more, whether it's at the high school, varsity level, or college level, or pro female sports level, transforms about 80% of their bodies and makes them unable to even reproduce.
Yeah.
In a lot of cases. And it's called the red S. It presents in female athletes due to their expending more calories than they're able to consume. The caloric deficit forces the body to take energy from other vital functions in order to keep up with the demands of concentrated sport. So this author, Scott Boylan, distinguishes between sport, like playing with your brother, playing pickle in the front yard, catch with a baseball with your brother and your dad if you're a girl. There's nothing wrong with that. But concentrated sport is like varsity level girls sports where you're doing it 20 hours or more. It messes up their bodies and it makes them start their bodies, their endocrinology start to function like males, and it makes them not able to function as women. And it affects their psychology. It's called red S, and it presents in like 80% of female athletes. So the only national level conservative that I've heard presenting this third position, the position that conservatives in the whole dysphoria debate are not conservative enough, is Michael Knowles, who I think is a mutual friend with you, too. He's the only one that's saying this, like, well, the real gender dysphoria is like girls should not be boxing. Now, I heard him on network news saying other sports are fine. No, other concentrated sports, any sports, are good for men. They make them more virile, more reproductively savvy. Any concentrated sports are bad for female biology. Again, that's kind of what really got us banned, saying there are real functional differences between men and women. And I'm just wondering why it's taking so long for conservatives to pick up on this point. What do you think?
I think that they don't want to face the wrath of any of the females in their party, or they already think that they can. Certainly, when you look at the politically, they think that they're going to be able to pander to the white Karens on the left. It's never going to happen. But I want to make 2 points about, 3 points about this. So firstly, particularly with boxing, they have to make weight, right? And anyone that's boxed that I don't, because I have made weight before, but I am a heavyweight, so it is what it is, right? But if you got to make weight, there's a whole load of stuff you've got to do that is incredibly taxing on the body, to your point, right? And even if you are a man, it's hard, right? It's really, really hard.
Yeah.
Secondly, I think it's really important for people to truly think about, because I trained with the WBC super middleweight champion of the world, Richie Woodall, and he was considered, he won if you remember back in the day, guys that might know this, in the 1988 Olympics in Seoul, Roy Jones got the silver, which he was robbed of. My friend got the bronze, right, in that. So that's how good he is. He's very, very, very good. Went on to win the WBC. And most people would say, well, Richie isn't a big puncher, right? That's one of the things. He's not a big puncher. He's not a big puncher. Well, I've been in the ring with Richie. He's a big puncher.
Yeah.
And the reason is the level from whatever competency we think we are, right? Like, you might think you're a good basketball player until you put LeBron on and then you're just like, I can't, there's nothing I can do. I can't get anywhere near him. He's moving and everything. It's such a high level, right? Because we only tend to look at things from our prism, right? Like maybe high school sports, we went out there and we watched the girls, and so for me with my daughters, my daughter plays basketball and whatever. But the jump to the professional level is like giant, right? And I don't think people really understand that. So they don't really understand the level of commitment and aggression and all the other elements that come into that, right? So it really is, it's almost like a different sport, right? When you get to that level, it's almost like, you can play college football and then, for men, you kind of get in there, they start stepping up to the NFL, but even in the NFL, it's a big jump, right?
course.
So that is another part of this. But going back to the third point I wanted to make about Steph's book, and your other book, can we have it up again? The two, right? Was it? I listened to my husband, whatever it is. I loved Steph's.
Ask your husband. Yeah, yeah,
the greatest Twitter handle of all time.
yeah.
By the way, it just was. Is that if you are banning that, if you are stopping the conversation because you don't like it, where is that going to lead us? Where does that, by them not inviting you? And I know what it is. There's a bunch of people like clutching their pearls. I have the same thing. I drop the F-bomb on, when I'm doing interviews and whatever, and people are like, well, we can't have Matt come and speak here. I'm like, what do you want? Right? Do you want like fighters for the faith or fighters for the cause to somehow be cucked in some other way? Like, I say this to my mom actually, because, I've been in the acting industry. You get knocked down all the time, right? You get knocked down, you get up, you get knocked down, you get up, you get knocked down, you get up. And it takes a kind of person to be able to endure that.
Yeah.
A certain kind of person. And if you want that kind of person, you're going to get the whole thing. And you might not like this little thing about it. About that
Take
person.
the bad with the good. You
got to take it. You got to take it. Now, you might want to work with it and you might want to guide or, whatever it is. But you can't look, and I said this to my mom because my mom gets like, she worries about me even at my age, and I have to say to mom, listen, you have a son that stands on principle on things, right? I'm also the same, she says to me, like, the knockbacks you get it's kind of like having thousands of job interviews and no job, and you still go in, you have to have that mentality, Tim. So when it gets to your book and Steph's book, invite you to the parishes and have a discussion about it. Have a discussion about it. Don't just say, I'm not having them because, I'm going to clutch my pearls about it. Have you in, right? That's what I would do. And it's the same thing, even, like I studied Islam. I'm like, I'm quite happy to talk to Muslims. I can talk to, it's not a problem. Do I think there are, great Muslims in the world? Of course I do. I know there's many people that have sacrificed their lives for the United States, actually. Does that mean that, there's radical elements? And if you know anything about Islam, the faith. Does that mean that you don't engage them in dialogue? Of course you engage them in dialogue, right? So again, going back to the point that I said about these little fiefdoms and this like not supporting the faith, that the first person or the people that they will come to when the shit hits the fan is you.
Yeah. Yeah. That we guys like us have lived that out, been passed over. But then when they need a baller for maybe a zestier news article or commentary piece, like, go to Marsden or go to Garden or go back to Patrick Coffin, even though he doesn't think Bergoglio is Pope Francis. Go to him. He's willing to say the truth. Every once in a while in the news cycle, they'll need a commentator who will say the whole truth, because even the whole truth every once in a while is popular. And I would just say that Steph and I are coming out with a new book in September. It's based on how to actually do patriarchy in the household. Well, we were just proving the theoretical possibility of it with these books, Matt. And that kicked up some dust, and now the Overton window has actually shifted back toward patriarchy. And
fancy that.
You fancy that? Our books had something to do with it. But now, like, no one knows how to do it. So we have this Leave and Cleave book that you can get on timothyjgordon.com. And we have this class that corresponds with it called One Flesh, also on timothyjgordon.com. We're running out of spaces. You guys can order both of those today. And we're very interested to see what the response to those will be. I know you have to run, but I just wanted, I can't have you on, and you're mentioning Islam. We've mentioned immigration, some migration. Yeah. Well, as a Brit, what is your view on what's going on over there? It looks crazy. And you're kind of, people will say to you, you're an immigrant, right? First you immigrated to America, and then you whatever it's called, emigrated from California to Texas. I
Yeah.
emigrated to Mississippi. What I mean, what's the response? I know what your response is, but
Right. So,
what's your take?
all right. So I think it's important to firstly say, well, like what my background is, coming from a very working class background. Like I tell people, I grew up in Mordor. Like it's literally what Tolkien based Mordor on. So I grew up in Mordor. And as I was growing up, like I was saying earlier on, linking back to my grandfather, is there wasn't like, of course, there's always going to be racism, like overt racism, but not really. I mean, it wasn't like, you know, bad. And I know people say, well, you're a white guy. I'm like, no, but I was on, theoretically, I would be on one side of it, right? Like whether it's the person that is doing it. And, we saw those, there was certainly some name calling, whatever, but pretty much everyone got on, right? They got on. And what we've seen mainly in the past 20 years is a demonization and disenfranchising of white men and women, white men in particular. And they're being told that they're responsible for the world's woes, that England and what it did in the past is bad. We deserve to give this XYZ to these, former colonies and whatever it might be. And England was just very, very accommodating. Like it was, taking people in and saying, okay, yes, we'll multiculturalism and this, and you're going to enrich our society. And the problem being is, and when I was growing up, it enriched the society because people that came there embraced being British. They wanted to be British. They looked at England and they were like, this was, whatever you want to think about, what it did in the empire. Well, people would look and they'd say, I want to be a part of that kind of which in the countries that went to it was the elite, right? Like if you go to India, like, you would want to be a part of something more, which by the way, over there, obviously there's a caste and poverty system that is ridiculous, which is way worse. But so England allowed that. And then what you saw certainly over the past 20 years is it's not enough, right? Like the grievance industry, because I want Americans to understand that like in England, it's kind of like America's very extreme, right? It's really, really extreme. England really isn't. It kind of like teeters around the middle and goes a little bit that way and it goes a little bit this way. Like, the Labour get in, it's pretty much the same as Conservatives on a few things. They don't have those like hot button issues like we do here, like abortion. That isn't even on the platform, right?
Mm-hmm.
So they just kept telling white people, basically you're the bad guys. And then what you started seeing, it was really clear, like, and I've always taken this attitude, Tim, is you might not be at war with a certain group of people, but they can absolutely be at war with you. And it doesn't matter how much you keep saying, but I'm not at war with them. And they're like, well, we're at war with you.
Right.
And there seems to be this kind of like cognitive dissonance about that. So, we go off and we get involved in wars in Afghanistan and in Iraq. And all of a sudden there's terrorist attacks in UK and people are like, hang on a second, why is that? I'm like, you guys are so stupid. Like, don't you understand? Like they are at war with you. Your army might be at war with them over there. You're not here because you're on a little island, but they see you as the enemy, right? And this is away from any kind of like bigger theological discussions about the difference, right? I'm not even talking about that. I'm not even talking about Islam in that sense. I'm just talking about, the enemies, the lines are being drawn because, they fight between themselves as well, Sunni and Shia. But what was happening was you would see like grooming gangs and they were like, we don't know who they are, or we are reluctant to, or that they wouldn't release who these people were. And everyone there is going, stop gaslighting me. I know who they are. Right. And the fact that you are not saying it is pissing me off. Like, you think I can't take it? You think that if you put out that there's a bunch of like Muslim grooming gangs in Rotherham, that we're going to go off and we're going to go right through the streets? Well, there was, and they didn't, right? But if you continually be told that you cannot deal with this and we're going to cover it up, and we're going to give them reduced sentences because poor person that comes from, you know, third world country is really a good person, really, really, really beneath. And then you have a two-tier justice system where they're throwing white kids that do something like within 24 hours, they've sentenced people. They've already sentenced them for the riots. And yet I saw it today. There was one kid that is due to be sentenced in 2025, who is, let's just put it like this, doesn't look like the guys that got sentenced. What do you think is going to happen? Because people are seeing it. So you've got two generations, Tim, of young men that are like, I have no prospects. This kind of DEI higher thing means that I'm seeing people be put above me. It's not on merit. And because England's so small, you know, you're really seeing it. And there's the other thing is Paul Joseph Watson talked about this, and he said that apparently back in like 2007, some statistician did a comparison not on like census but on consumption of food and you know, consumables, and said back then England was about 77 million people. Right now, when I was in England, it was 55 million people. Right, and I went there 2 weeks ago, and you could feel just way more people. The demographic had changed. And look, I don't care, you know, I mean, you know, as Catholics, we don't care whether you're black or white or, you know, Asian, who cares? It's not about that though, is it? All right. It's the failure to embrace the culture and this kind of idea that this imported culture is better than the one that is there. So, you know, you get into the
point. Let me,
so go.
I mean, like on that issue, I don't mean black, white, or necessarily colors, but like it is kind of though. Ethnicities we keep saying, conservatives for so long have been saying like, well, it's about, are you going to embrace like this new culture? You can cross the border and we don't care what color you're. But there are people now that are like, well, wait, is this one more of those many issues that conservatives rolled over to progressivism on? I guess like color blindness or something. And I'm not super entrenched on any position, but I'm just I'm saying I'm curious. No, I mean, here. Like, I mean, what if there is like we said, a kind of preferential kinship group of correspondence between race and culture? It doesn't mean that it's impossible for a purple guy to accept a green guy's culture, but there is at least genetic evidence that like if you try to import a bunch of purple guys into a green guy culture, they're not going to get it as well as the green guys naturally do, or vice versa. Like I
agree. No, yeah. I completely agree with that. I'm not disputing that. But so what I'm saying is back in the day, the thing that attracted people about Great Britain was its Britishness.
Sure.
What was the things that created it? And if you, like I say, I look back at you know, C.S. Lewis, Tolkien, these guys, when you're looking at G.K. Chesterton, you know, you're looking at these guys that were authentically British and had a British way about them. And that was attractive to other people because they aspired to it. Now, it's a Christian Catholic mentality, right? Like that's what it is. That's the culture. And what happened was we used to have people come over and they would embrace it, right? And they would, you know, become a part of the culture. And with England losing its faith, it started losing its identity because you can't go out there and like, you know, fight for the flag of St. George. Well, the flag of St. George is the flag of St. George, right? If you don't have the faith that's linked to it, it's just not as important. It just isn't, you know. So they just diminish that. And then they said, you come over here and your culture is just as important and just as good as ours. Well, it's not. It's clearly not. Stay in your own country, right? And figure it out there. You don't have to come here because, listen, I love my family in England. Ideally, I wouldn't have had to leave my family to give my nuclear family the kind of life that I wanted to give them. But I did. Right.
Right.
So, but ideally, you don't want to move out of that. And so when I come to America, I embrace America. You know, I'm an American. You know this. I'm probably more patriotic than the majority of people. But I knew, you know, what it was all about, and I embraced the culture fully. And I think that right now, what you're doing is there are people, even here, they're coming and they're going, "Oh no, your culture is just as," and it's clearly not. It's clearly
Right.
not. It's not as good. Else you'd be staying where you were, and your culture would have been prosperous.
Right. Exactly.
It's just simple.
I think it reduces to Gen X Catholics said this in the chat. Like race is not everything. We know that. Pope Pius XII wrote beautifully on it, but it's not nothing. And therefore it's like
Yeah.
this is why immigration seems to be bullshit. It's like people stay in your own countries. Oh well, but I like the values of England that it's inculcated there. You know, history of the English speaking peoples. Well, start cultivating that where you're at, because there's going to be other aspects of culture that you don't understand,
Yeah.
that you might not want to embrace. Better just
That's
take
right.
what you see that's English or American and try to cultivate it in your own country where you have, because there's for every one thing you see that you love, maybe it's the franchise, you want to vote for your leaders, even though it turns out our countries are basically banana republics, we learned in 2020. But if you idealize that and you say, well, we want the vote, okay, take that, but all the food and the presuppositions and the presuppositions beneath those presuppositions of your culture, they're not going to be there if you go to England or America. You can't get there and then turn it into like Islamabad or Mexico City. And I just think that what I was referring to that Pius had written is, look, race isn't everything, but it's not nothing. He says the difference between sex, male and female, is 1,000 times more important than the difference between ethnicities. He's affirming two principles. Difference between a man and a woman's really, really, really fundamental. We're two just totally different things that are attracted to each other. Same species, we're attracted to each other. That's the big difference.
Yeah.
But the difference between a white man and a black man and a purple man and a green man is we're more similar than a man and a woman, because there's a fundamental difference there. But we're not the exact same. So again, race isn't everything, but it's not nothing. And I think this pollinates the discussion in a kind of paleocon way that we have to get back to saying race is, yeah, I'm never gonna, I have friends of lots of different ethnic hues, but like it's not nothing. There is some sense in which
Yeah, I mean, there are some differences. I mean, just even culturally, there are differences in different communities, right? I mean, we've seen it like there's a difference. It's funny because, you can see the link between like the Irish and the Italians, right? Because there's a very similar kind of vibe with them. But there was something I wanted to comment on about the race thing. I think that what is happening, unfortunately, is people are so you got two sets. I want to make this clear. There's two real sets of people. For example, if you look at the Hispanics that came in this country that are like, Gen Xers, a lot of them came in legally. They're actually absolutely anti-illegal immigration. Like they are hardcore, way, way, way more anti-immigration than white people in this country.
Mm-hmm.
If you look at the same thing with the people, I guess boomers into Gen X. Well, Gen X in the UK is like first generation Indian, Pakistani, black. But the people that came there initially loved England, and they came there because they wanted to be a part of the UK. They grew up looking up to it. They understood, that there's this structure there, certainly in India, for education and all this. These aren't the people that are rioting, right? These are the second generation where they've made their money in the UK. And now, because they don't, initially they realize that, and it goes back to what we were saying initially, is that money isn't everything. stuff isn't everything. Culture means something, and faith means something. So they are, in the same way, you're getting more conservatives now, more people, uh, going back towards faith. If you don't have the right people who are faith leaders educating them on the truth, then you have disgruntled people that want to smash things.
Right.
So there's a whole generation of people there that are being told, England is this colonial. I retweeted something today about this woman who said, the only reason why we came to this shitty dust bowl. I'm like, whoa, 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 whoa.
Whoa.
Hang on a minute. Like, England, in the 40s, 50s was great, and it's still a beautiful country. So all this animosity is actually coming from people that are privileged for the most part. They're certainly more privileged than me, growing up in a working class council estate in Birmingham. So it's a really strange thing. You've got this, one layer of people. And by the way, there are many people that love the UK. There are a lot of people that are there, that are immigrants that do love the UK. So what you've got is you've got this weird kind of like mix of like second and third generation immigrants, and then you have people that we brought in from a war zone, where we've literally gone over there and destroyed their lives for the most part, and that's not a good mix.
Right.
Because they're reinforcing, well, they came over and they killed cousin, whatever, and then it's reinforcing this. And what is interesting now, I saw a black guy today in the UK going, I'm just staying out of this. The black guy's like, I don't want anything to do with this. Like, I'm stepping out of this. This isn't my thing. Which is not necessarily true, right? But I think you're seeing that, and you're seeing that here, where Hispanics that came here illegally are very, very angry with what is going on. Because again, in the UK, if I may, one of the big issues that is out there is, by not calling Islamic terrorism, what happens is people don't discern whether you're from India or Pakistan.
Mm-hmm.
People don't discern whether you're a Hindu or a Sikh. And Sikhs who have been fighting Muslims for hundreds of years, they're not discerning between that. And that's a problem, right? Because you should call it what it is. Like, labels are really important. What you call people is really important. So what you've got now, I believe, is you've got this like confluence of things where I know that there are Sikhs out there. They're like, hang on a minute, like, we're on your side, actually, but yeah,
we don't like Muslims either. The Sikhs,
they don't like Muslims, but I think that what they're saying is, like, I'm a brown person and I'm getting lumped in with all these other brown people. And, there's always agitators, there are racists, they're racists on both sides. And it's just a colossal mess. But it all comes from, initially, number one, abandoning your culture, and number two, weak leaders.
Yeah.
And that the weak leaders come from the weak populace not standing up and holding them accountable and saying, no, I'm not allowing you to do that. And like right now, I think that what has happened, this is not going away, Tim. Like, the Brits are like, hang on a second, you locked us down under COVID. It was bullshit. I couldn't see, my grandfather dying. You forced me to have this injection that I didn't want. Now you lied and lied and lied. And by the way, this is the Conservatives, right? It's not Labour, it's the Conservatives. And now they're like, no, I'm not doing this anymore. You're not doing this to me. You're not bankrupting me. We've seen your corruption and we're not doing it. And that's why those poor girls, it's just unbelievable to think those poor kids who got killed are just, people go, oh, well, he wasn't a Muslim. You guys don't understand what flashpoints are, right? Like, this didn't come in a vacuum. It's not because of one particular thing. It's all these other things, including showing a picture of the guy who did it when he was 10 in his school uniform. And people are like, you are, I nearly said the F word, like, you are gaslighting us. Like, stop this. Stop treating us like children that can't deal with it. And so now they're like, all right, you're treating us like children that can't deal with it. We're going to act like children that don't,
right.
can't deal with it. And by the way, you cracking down on us even more when you're like, oh, we met with community leaders. Oh, you lot can go to jail, but we met with community leaders to make sure they left all of their weapons in the mosque. I'm like, what are you doing? It's like, put them in jail. Put them in jail.
Yeah. Yeah.
Don't put them in jail. Don't put them in jail. Whichever. But if you are continuing that cycle, you're going to have complete chaos and violence. And it's not going away, mainly because young white men and women are like, I've got nothing in my future.
Right. That's right. That's what here we got to close it up, but like Trump has tapped into that.
Yeah.
Young white, particularly young white men are like, what? I know it's right now, it's more acute in England, but Trump tapped into a right-wing populism of young white men that have been basically disenfranchised, told they have no future. The future is female. The future is melanated. And these guys who are the closest thing to natives to this land, don't talk to me about Aboriginals. The closest thing to natives to this land are, I guess, WASP white guys, at least Christian white guys. And they've been disenfranchised. And there's going to be a response to that. There is. That was the original Trump movement. It got kind of stymied in 2020 on this side of the pond. Now it's sort of back. And we're looking across the pond to England, and they're going to have their moment. I mean, they had the Brexit, and it seems like there's something new that could be salutary around the bend, because people seem to be sick of it. By the way, the quote that I was talking about was not Pius XII, it was Paul VI. Even in the glorified state, in humans, the difference of sex exercises an important influence much deeper than ethnic differences. The latter do not affect the human as intimately as the difference of sex, the effect of God's will from the beginning, male and female, he created them. What I like about this that was relevant to what you were saying is that Paul VI doesn't say ethnic differences are nil, like nothing. He says they're less fundamental, less important to human identity than male or female, which is like fundamental to identity. What's the first thing I go do? Should I practice sports? Well, are you a male or a female? If you're a male, yes. If you're a female, like, no, you need to be in the house. You might want to be a cheerleader, but ethnicity is not that important, but it's not nothing. And it does influence the human person less intimately than sex, but still somewhat. And I think that needs to regain a somewhat prominent place in the way that we talk about immigration, because it's like, yeah, okay, that's fine. People like England and America. They're the two greatest countries of the last, 700 years. They're clearly, and Winston Churchill wrote History of the English-Speaking Peoples. Mm-hmm. In the last 700 years, these are the two. So people are going to want our wealth and stuff, but it's not enough just to want wealth and freedom for people from armpit countries of the world to come there, because they're not going to get it all, because ethnicity does count for something. And let me
just say, the funny thing about that is ethnicity and culture is celebrated unless you are a white person, and that is not a racist, like, controversial statement. I'm saying that if you're gonna celebrate Japanese culture, then we can celebrate English culture. I was just there, and I went, and it always marvels me. I go and look at the Tower of London, and the history there is just unbelievable. And it's history, and that's okay, right? It's all right. So, but again, what I think the problem is we're saying we must embrace all these different cultures, but we're not going to embrace the culture that is of the land that we've gone to, and that is a problem. Yeah. And I think that what you start getting is a lack of identity and something rooting you in that place. And if, as you know, if you don't have skin in the game, it's like my son said, I want a car. And I said, okay, well, you got to go buy it. Like, you got to go work for it. You got to buy it. And so for him now, he looks after that car. He makes sure there's no scratches on it. He's not driving erratically, all that, because he's got skin in the game. And if you don't have skin in the game, then who cares? If it's not, if it's something that is disposable, like, okay, well, I can come to England and I can rape it for all that it has, and I can go off somewhere else then afterwards, then you don't have any investment in the future of that place, right? And I think that
Yeah.
that's one of the bad things that we're seeing in the USA, because all the money's going back to Mexico, right? They'll come over here and they'll send the money back to Mexico, and they're not embracing, like, to me, if this is going to sound pretty extreme, I would ban Spanish.
Yeah.
I would say, no, you have to be able to speak English if you come into this country. And if I see a Spanish sign, apart from it somewhere where you go and eat, you're going to get fined, because we need a common language. Like, we need, and that is about unity. That's not about like separating. By the way, I'm married to a Maltese. I keep asking my wife, even though it's very frustrating because they speak English as well. I want to learn Maltese. And when I go to Malta, I want to speak Maltese. And I think it's really, really important for them to maintain their history. And since they've actually, a segue, since they've actually joined the EU, the younger kids don't know Maltese. So because it's such a small island, within like 50 to 100 years, there aren't going to be any Maltese anymore. There's actually going to be more Maltese in Australia than there will be in Malta. And I think that's really sad. I mean, the Catholicism in Malta has already been decimated.
It has.
In the time that I've been there. I mean, and again, weak leaders. But this is the issue. But I think that the UK, it's not going anywhere. They're talking about doing more marches, but the more people that they arrest and say, when it's two-tier policing, it's not going to get any better, Tim. I wish it would. And look, we all, like I said, I mean, we're all brothers and sisters in Christ. Like those of us that are brothers and sisters in Christ, and like you say, we can recognize the difference, but we also recognize the things that unite us and bring us together. And those things are way more important. Not to sound like a kumbaya person, but they are more important. But in this day and age, you're lambasted for pointing out any like real obvious things that might be politically incorrect. And
Sure.
that's not right. That's what I'm saying. Like, so they shouldn't stop you from going to talk in parishes just because of one book that you said is a very puritanical thing. And what it does, I'm going to tell the people out there, what it does is it stops people from speaking their mind, right? Because a lot of people make their living from going and doing these things. So what you're basically doing is you're getting someone it's just an echo chamber, and you're just going to have people tell you what you hear already. And if that's the case, save your money,
Yeah.
right? Save your money. Just talk to yourself in the mirror. Like, don't ask
Right.
someone else to come in that might enrich you or might provoke you to grow, right? Like you need, this, you lift weights, you break down the muscle in order to grow. Right. And if you are just looking at reinforcing and just having the same people tell you what you want to hear, what's the point?
Right. Right. I hope people get hip to that and get hip to that en masse, because then folks like me and you and Pat will really be booming. But final thing, I want to give.
Sorry, go on,
Yeah,
brother.
go ahead. Yeah.
No, I was just going to say, but we're still going to do what we do regardless. I mean, that's just the way it is. And I've resigned myself that, you have to humble yourself, as as an alpha, and I'm sure the majority of the people that are listening to this will understand, is that sometimes you got to just humble yourself in front of God and understand that it's His will and not yours. And it's the most difficult thing to do. Certainly
Right.
someone who is an alpha who makes things happen and has a family. Sometimes you have to just look and say, well, this is your lot in life and this is where it's going. It doesn't mean you quit, right? It doesn't mean you stop, but it means that, you have to really recognize and understand where God wants you. And the majority of the time, it's not where you want, but it's what you need to
That's
get
true.
to heaven.
That's why ostensibly prayers aren't always answered. Like the guy starting a YouTube page being like, send me 1 million subscribers. Well, maybe that would be horrible for you. But since you're relatively new on YouTube, I do want to send people to Matthew D. Marsden on YouTube. You're reasonably new there. People follow Matt on Twitter. Your Twitter handle is
Matthew D. Marsden.
Yeah, there it is. Matthew D. Marsden also. Matt, thanks for joining. It's been long overdue. folks,
Yeah.
go follow Matt on YouTube and on Twitter, and get ready, parish orphans and retrogrades, because we're finishing in the next 8 days. We're finishing up Leave and Cleave. That is the how-to book, how to apply patriarchy in your household. It's co-authored by me and Steph. It's going to be my 5th book, authored or co-authored. That's up for pre-order right now, as is the class that it is the text for. Both of those can be purchased now, and with the class and the book should be ready for mid-September. The class begins on September the 11th. Go buy the book, buy the class on timothyjgordon.com now. It's going to hopefully set things back on fire the way Case for Patriarchy and Ask Your Husband did. Matt, I'll give you the last word. Is there anything you wanted to call out as we peace out?
No. I'm very grateful for your friendship, and
Me too, man.
I'm grateful for your family. You guys are the real deal.
You too.
And I wish that we would have, done this earlier or before, and maybe we can do it again. But yeah, I mean, I'm very grateful for you, and that's basically it. I don't have anything really particularly like what's the word I'm looking for? Inspirational to say, but I guess the one thing I would say is, just for people, and I know this is kind of redundant on this, but for anyone that might have come across this interview who don't know you or don't know me, and they're watching this, is just to be open-minded, because you never know what you might find in these things, and that's certainly the way that I approach things. So that's it. Just grateful for you, brother. Grateful for you.
I love you, man. And it's true. The funny thing is, anyone who makes it to the end of this interview, this is a slightly longer one, will by definition already be open-minded, because they've heard us say some things that you're not going to hear in a lot of other places, really many other places at all. And if they made it to the end, then that means salve. You are open-minded. God bless you all. Matt, God bless you, and Nad, and your whole family. You've been married 19 years. I've been married 19 years. You have 8 kids. I have 7. Is that right?
Yep.
Yeah, you have 8. I have 7. But similar numbers there. Yeah, love to the family, man. God bless you all, friends of retrogrades. We had Pat on Monday, his good buddy Matt today. On Friday, I'm hoping to line up another guest, but I don't want to say who I'm thinking it is for Friday. I've been doing more guests since I've been back from vacay. Sick of talking into screens alone. Matt, we'll get together, get the families together soon, brother.
Right on.
Peace.